Hi, this is John Colton Barry, story editor of Be Cool Scooby-Doo, and you are listening to a podcast named Scooby-Doo.
The gang's all here, they're on the case, and there's no ghost that they wouldn't face, 'cause they dig it, Scooby-Doo. Yeah, they dig it, Scooby-Doo.
Hey gang, and welcome to another episode of a podcast named Scooby-Doo. On this episode, I'm going to be continuing the conversation I started last episode with fellow Scooby-Doo podcaster Nick Robes. Nick is the proprietor of What's With You Scooby-Doo, a podcast where Nick sits down with various friends and they watch an episode of Scooby-Doo and discuss it. Although more often than not, the conversation degrades into songs and digressions, and they struggle to drag themselves back to talking about the main topic of discussion, but a good time is had by all. It's actually quite an entertaining show. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. And if you've listened to last episode, you know that Nick was kind enough to come in and pinch hit when scheduling conflicts made it impossible for me to have an episode in April where any of the Scooby-Doo creatives that I had kind of lined up could not make a date or time work. I wasn't really sure what was going to come of it, but I really enjoyed my chat with Nick, and judging from some of the reactions from you guys, you've been enjoying it too. So hopefully you also enjoy the second and final part of the conversation. If you hated last episode, you'll probably hate this episode as well, and maybe just avoid it. Good news for you, though, is that I will be getting back to proper interviews with Scooby-Doo professionals. Some of the people that I had lined up were talking about having some conversations this month, and the long-promised John Colton Barry interview will finally be posted as the next episode. So, like I said, if you're not enjoying the aimless conversation of Nick and myself, hold tight. You will have more Scooby-Doo interviews coming at you in the near future. So until then, I'm going to keep this brief and not do too much talking. Although I will just point out that if you remember in the last episode, my intro and outro, my voice was pretty much going. The interview, the conversation is ultimately what burnt out my voice when I was sick. So you can kind of hear my voice degrading as the conversation goes in part 2. So that's kind of what's happening there. You may or may not notice it. I might just be being a little bit self-conscious, but I just thought I'd point that out. Yeah, so enjoy the conversation, and I will see you on the other side.
Enough of this delightful, potentially humiliating banter. Light 'em up.
Da-da-da-da-da. Oh my gosh. What is happening in the direct-to-video movies? They keep quoting the Batman the Animated Series soundtrack.
What are you talking about?
God, I love Canada. Do you hear it? When I say about, does that sound weird?
No, can you hear something weird in my about?
Yeah, you say about. It's like AOT instead of OUT. About. I mean, I exaggerated it there.
Instead of a boat?
Yeah, about.
About?
Yeah, about. Oh my god. But it's honestly, I can't remember what exactly it is, but in both, I think, Legend of the Vampire and, sorry, I'm like going deep on these direct-to-video movies right now. And the one that the one that's getting released this Sunday, Loch Ness, the Loch Ness Monster, it does like, I don't think it's the bum ba bum ba bum ba ba, but I think it's like the it just like shows up and you're like, what is that doing here?
Well, it is all Warner Brothers.
Why not?
Speaking of music in Scooby-Doo, one of the things that What's New has for it that surprised me, it actually features songs by the Ramones.
Wait, really?
Yeah, there's like, I think 2 episodes somewhere in the 3-season run where they're doing a romp and they're running around, and it's like, I thought, is that the Ramones? And I went online and I checked, and it's the Ramones. They're using a Ramones song in Scooby-Doo. I'm like, that's badass.
Okay, well, while we're on that topic, what makes Scooby Scooby? Let's talk about the music, because I think so the original series obviously has music throughout the entire thing in the background, and you get to know like every single one of those. There's like the and then there's the what I think is called the chicken bit, where it's like and then there's like the recycled bits that go through every single episode, and there's a soundtrack throughout the entire thing. Then that evolves to the songs, which you get such songs as happy is the secret word, and if it's happy I can take you anywhere.
Which everybody thinks is like in every episode of Where Are You, but that's a season 2 thing.
Yeah, that comes along much later, which is fun. I like the chase songs.
Oh yeah, the romps are great.
Oh, it's well because isn't it Jeepers is the Creeper? Like I'm in love with an ostrich.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got those songs that they're fantastic to listen to.
Oh, they released that album. Scooby Snacks?
I think so, yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, and it's got the Me and My Shadow Demon song on it too.
And my shadow
demon.
It's like such a vaudeville number. It's so much fun. But like so they previously are using something that is normal for people to hear in that time, which is a soundtrack throughout the entire episode, because it's animation and people aren't necessarily going to notice it at that time. And then they have what aren't exactly pop songs integrated into it. And then you skip forward to, let's just go straight to Zombie Island, and Third Eye Blind shows up.
When I first heard that in '98, I was like, this is amazing. And then when I revisited it a few months ago, I was like, eh.
I was like, this is dated as shit.
Yes, exactly. And then
not as dated as the Billy Ray Cyrus one.
No, I know. That was insane. He doesn't even, he's picking up a paycheck on that one. Like, he doesn't even feel like I think he was lying in bed when he sang it.
Let's go over under right now. If either of us find out, we'll pay the other one out. Who got paid more for the theme song? Billy Ray Cyrus or Jennifer Love Hewitt? Yeah. I'm gonna say Jennifer Love Hewitt.
That's very possible.
Right? Because who was Billy Ray Cyrus in 2001? Isn't that when that came out? Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost and 9/11? Wasn't that?
I think that was 2000. I think they were a year or two apart.
All right. Jennifer Love Hewitt. I'm putting my money on that. At what point does it become? Because obviously, I think Pup Named Scooby-Doo amps the ante of what is what the music for Scooby-Doo will be, because you not only get a reinterpretation of the original score with the Little Shop of Horrors style, like Scooby-Doo, Be-Doo, and it just goes throughout the whole thing, and it's super fun. You get also a villain theme for every episode. That's ambitious.
That is.
Because they are well-produced songs, and you have to have one for every episode. I'm not entirely sure what my question is here. I think it does have something to do with the effort of that compared to just inserting Simple Plan into your show. I have no problem with Sum 41, Simple Plan, or no, I have problems with Nickelback, but that's fine.
We should probably define what are the tropes, what are the sort of typical Scooby-Doo things that people think this is what a Scooby-Doo show needs. We've talked about the romps, we've talked about the costumes. Oh, I wanted to mention, for a long time now, I've desperately wanted to speak this to some sort of forum where anybody else other than me can hear. That whole thing about Scooby and Shaggy getting into costumes, and
I call it the costume gag.
The costume gag, where they fool the creature into believing he's in a dentist's office, or he's in a Disney musical, or whatever it happens to be.
Sure.
if you were to believe that this was truly a monster, that it was a werewolf, that it was an ice creature, that it was a shadow demon, it would make sense or it doesn't make sense for them to just buy into it. But if you accept the fact that 9 times out of 10, these are people in costumes, I feel
and
that...
they see another person in a costume?
I feel that there's a little more verisimilitude there. There's like they can somehow be conned into believing that, oh yeah, I'm at the supermarket or I'm in a dentist's office and this is happening and this is actually a dentist. And because they always do that thing where they like shake their head at the end and they're like, how did I get fooled?
I mean, the flip side of that is they are in a costume conning people. You think they'd be more savvy to people in costumes conning people, being like, wait, I've seen this racket before.
Why does this seem so familiar?
I feel like somehow I've seen this. In my own
here
behavior?
Rings a bell.
Just come this way, man. We have the finest table. I'm gonna stop you right there. I know that mustache is drawn on. I've drawn many a mustache on my face in my day. Hi, Harry the Hypnotist. I will be a clown later on.
So we have the mystery. The mystery is key. We have the costume.
I was
gag.
breaking this down in the shower, actually. Yeah. I would say Act 1, cold open, meet the monster. Which leads into Act 1, gang in the mode of some conveyance.
Are you... Sorry, I have to interrupt. Are you one of the people who, when you watch the show, even though you know that, like, the first person that they meet is the creature, you don't actually realize that's, like, the person in the costume until the very end? Or do you just suss it out right away?
Oh, you were just...
I'm one of those people who I honestly don't know who it is until the end. There's, like, some psychological triggering device that's just like, no.
Oh, that's fascinating. I go through. I have about 4 different layers happening in my head, where, because I have the one that says like, oh, it's always the first person / only person you meet in the whole episode, and then I have the second. There's like another voice that says, hey, this might be the time that they're lying to you because they've set up a precedent, and now they might start messing with you based on that precedent. And then there's a third voice that looks at the previous 2 voices and says, like, no rules apply, baby! And I'm like, all right, cool. And then there's a 4th voice that's like, hey, you're spending far too much time thinking about Scooby-Doo. You should probably think about going back to grad school. And I'm like, that's probably not going to happen. So, Act 1, so what you basically get is a cold open, which introduces you to the monster. Act 1 introduces you to the gang and why they're on their way to somewhere. In my preference, typically the gang is not on their way to solve a mystery in Act 1. So, for example, like Pup Named Scooby-Doo or Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? The gang is on their way to visit a friend or do something different. And they run into a monster. Not always the case. They are professional mystery solvers in, for example, the live-action movies, or some of the in-between years of the 80s. Now, Act 2, you get the realization. Act 2 basically begins when Freddy says, I think we have a mystery on our hands, gang. And they have to start actively investigating it. Act 3 begins when they need to make a trap and catch the ghost and then reveal who it is and why this person was doing this all along. I feel like that is the broad enough strokes where you can encapsulate 75% of Scooby-Doo.
But the smaller things, the things like the creature gags, the things like the romps, or the costume gags.
Yeah, costume gags or eating, which I think is maybe the biggest one, right?
I also found it interesting that the eating gag is something that Takamoto he almost like despaired that that's sort of what people glommed onto and continued with, because he just thought that it was kind of okay every now and then, but it became such a like integral character bit for these two.
Oh, interesting.
I was listening to my interview with Lance. It's been so long since I've done an episode, I wanted to remember what my episodes sound like.
And this is not it.
Yeah. And he made a point talking about the structure of the plot of Alien Invaders, where he said, you look at Fred, Daphne, and Velma. They do the usual investigative procedures. They go through their process. They find clues. They do it in an intellectual, and, they do the legwork.
Meanwhile, back at the farm, Shaggy and Scooby are doing something else.
And they literally, end up in the exact same spot by, falling in a hole.
Yeah.
And he referred to Scooby and Shaggy as agents of chaos. And I
Yeah,
thought, amazing.
That was fascinating, and I found it not as compelling when I watched the movie, or not as compelling as necessarily Witch's Ghost. But when he said it, I was like, oh, I get how this works now. I see these moving pieces.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. But yeah, I loved his putting them kind of in that, giving them that label. Because now every time I watch an episode, I think of them as agents of chaos. They are, that group kind of has two sides to it, and it's the order and the chaos, and it makes, I don't know, there's a level to the episodes now. It doesn't matter which iteration. And it's the reason why the episodes without Fred, Velma, and Daphne, they don't ring as true to me, because I think there's such a pivotal, tension between characters that even when they're essentially playing archetypes, I think it's necessary to have them. So, amazingly bringing it back to the main point of the episode here.
Haha, we're going to wrap it up. The other side of that is that what you're talking about is the meanwhile back at the ranch sort of idea. So in Alien Invaders, you get the gang minus Scooby and Shaggy investigating and doing their thing and ending up at the same point where Scooby and Shaggy bumble into, right? And the way that those things happen is, for the most part, fairly organic, and it moves in a way that doesn't feel choreographed too much. Now, Daphne is in, the mid-'80s series as well as 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, but it's not a meanwhile back at the ranch kind of thing. She has no independence. She is a babysitter. She has to be the straight man to the shit show that is Shaggy, Scooby, Scrappy, and Flim Flam. Like a bunch of ridiculous characters that have no grounding whatsoever, aside from this poor woman.
I kind of feel like Vincent Van Gogh represents the audience. In his irritation and frustration with the characters. He's like, oh.
I told you once, I told you 1,000 times.
Everybody's afraid to call him.
I love that.
I haven't watched a lot of 13 Ghost episodes since they first came out, so my memory's kind of foggy on them. But just kind of revisiting the one I saw today, the Shadow Demon, and some other ones that I've seen recently, the jokes are all, the fruit, it's not even low-hanging fruit. It's like fruit that's been on the ground for days and is bruised. Bruised and slightly fermented,
Well, they're all recycled gags from Jack Benny.
It was disappointing, and I found that even though I kind of liked the dynamic of the show in some ways, it's kind of like the show needs a number of moving parts working in tandem in order to be a good Scooby-Doo. It can't just be, one or two things. It can't just be this character is here or that character does that thing. I think it's a bit of a Rube Goldberg kind of device.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because the episode, the shows that work, for example, Pup, in my opinion, Pup Named Scooby-Doo, Mystery Incorporated, Be Cool, they interject a few different working elements into it. So that's fascinating that you would say that.
And maybe, one thing that we kind of keep tangentially or in a roundabout way sort of addressing is that the shows that sort of pay homage or retain the spirit of that original series. Sorry, my voice is starting to go. Those are the ones that resonate the most. Mystery Incorporated, it kind of put the gang together back in a way that I don't think it had been in a while. And it brought some of that humor and sort of acknowledged and addressed the ridiculousness of what they do. And Be Cool's kind of the same thing. And they all have their own specific kind of humor and things that they're riffing on and kind of bringing into the mix to give it a different sort of seasoning. But, What's New worked because it brought back the characters as a group. A Pup Named Scooby-Doo worked because even though it was like a completely different context, it was the five of them solving mysteries.
And mostly Fred was going to say red herring.
Yes. But I think, I don't know, maybe the simplest answer is that what makes Scooby-Doo is the original series. As long as you don't treat the original series as something to be ashamed of. You look at even the live-action movies, you look at the stuff that they reference from the original movies, but they don't reference them in a loving way, necessarily.
It's all ironic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, look how silly this is, or...
And the insincerity is what gives it that kind of... what works in trauma films, because it was written by James Gunn. What works in trauma films is the disgust and the horrific attitude towards cinema. And that can't work for Scooby-Doo, because Scooby-Doo is about sincerity. 100%. These kids have to want it. And you know what I'm saying? Like
yeah.
if Fred doesn't say like, well, we've got a mystery on our hands and I don't believe it, you're screwed.
The Kiss movie. Like, the Kiss movie is, It's off the chain bizarre, but I felt that it was one of the more Scooby-Doo movies that I've seen out of the direct-to-video movies in a long time. It just felt...
Well, even the WWE movie, I mean, John Cena in that movie, like, knocks it out of the park because he's just like, what? Oh, what's happening? I'm going to lift up this rock. And you're like, yeah, John Cena. Like, I don't care that that's impossible. I'm fine with it. I don't care if this is the most confused bad guy that has ever existed in a Scooby-Doo movie. Because is it a bear? Is it a robot? Is it flaming? Is it a demon? I don't know what's happening. I don't care.
And that's another good point. I don't think the bad guy or the mystery really matters. I think the bad guy and the mystery need to be there, but it's not necessarily...
And it needs to be sincere.
Yeah. Yeah, it
like,
does.
I feel like whether it's real or not, whether it's a supernatural thing or whether it's a person in a costume, I feel like the gang needs to approach it as a problem to be solved.
I agree. Like, I think that without a mystery, particularly in a lot of previous versions, like I've seen episodes of Be Cool that can function with a weak to almost no mystery just because it's interesting to watch the characters interacting, because they've injected so much personality into each individual character. I love the fact that starting the show, John said that he loved writing for Daphne, and as the show progressed, he said by about halfway or 2/3 into the first season, he fell in love with Fred.
Oh, interesting.
And his favorite episodes are The People versus Fred Jones and some Fred Time, which is season 2, which you haven't seen because you're an American citizen. But yeah,
yes, my citizenship is really.
But
it's messing with me in a few ways. I'm not gonna lie. But
yeah, so those episodes that I think part of the building blocks, part of the thing, like I'm getting I don't know. Go on.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to try and rein in what we're trying to say, because we're also trying to say a topic which is unanswerable, which is what is Scooby-Doo, which I don't think you can actually answer that question, because I feel like 30 years ago or 40 years ago there would have been an obvious answer, but now we have a plethora of Scooby-Doos which offer a lot of ideas that are compelling. Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island proves that the monsters can be real, and that's still a compelling version of Scooby-Doo. You know what I'm saying? But I think, let's say that we can't necessarily answer definitively. We've put some things on the table, but let's answer some questions that you and I can answer. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Who's your favorite?
Who's my favorite character?
In the gang.
In the gang. It depends on the iteration.
Ah, damn it.
I can't just say one character over the entire 47 years.
All right.
I mean, during Mystery Incorporated, I had a mad Velma crush. I've really been enjoying Fred in Be Cool, but I also kind of love the Daphne du Jours. I guess interestingly enough, Scooby-Doo is not my favorite character. Sometimes it's Shaggy, but it alternates between the three characters who are considered super dull and who the network believes are completely unnecessary to the concept.
I feel like, so when I was in college, or actually, I had just graduated college, and my friend who was a year behind me, he was like, we had been writing musicals together, and he was like,
as you do.
Let's write a yeah, right. And he was like, let's write a musical. I was like, cool, I want to do a Scooby-Doo musical. And he was like, all right. And
did you actually do it?
Oh, yeah. You can find it. I think if you YouTube Scooby-Doo musical, you can find it. But so he wrote the book and the lyrics, and I wrote the music. And we both kind of fell in love with Velma, because it was mostly that voice of reason, and that, I mean, she's younger, canonically, and it was like that go-getter attitude that we kind of were both just like, this is the George Harrison that we were looking for.
Probably Velma more than any other character does stand out for me, because Velma has the intellect, so she's kind of compelling in that way, and she also has that ability to hang out with Shaggy and Scooby and not be a total square. And she also has that, she will look at the situation, recognize the ridiculous of the situation, and just kind of roll her eyes and be kind of condemning and accepting of it at the same time.
Well, and also, I mean, if you take it from the perspective of like the Carl Sagan thing, right? Like the idea of skepticism, right? She is skeptical of everything through all the franchises. So, I mean, if you look at the original series, she's kind of the one who inserts some awkward facts and is kind of a downer, but like...
Sorry,
also,
I was just remembering there have been times where she'll start talking about like ancient Indian lore from 30,000 years ago.
Or like the episode where she just like talks about what makes fog. She's like, fog comes from here, actually, and like pushes her glasses up, and you're like, what? No, nobody was asking at all. But like, even later on, like she believes in things, but is always like, like you think of Witch's Ghost, like most of that movie is predicated upon her. Like she's the one. She's fascinating.
I think that's one of the things I liked about Mindy Cohn's portrayal, because she could really pull off the sassy Velma and the sarcastic Velma, as well as the just like totally square, I'm going to get completely bogged down in studying, researching or whatever.
Yeah, it's not squareness based off of stunted growth. It's squareness based off of passion. Like, I don't have time for this. Like, this is what I'm focused on.
Yeah, for a character who has so little outward passion.
Yeah.
She is one of the more driven of the group.
It's fascinating.
It's hard it's hard to, because as much as I love Daphne in Be Cool, what's new, she was the MacGyver character with her makeup bag.
Yes.
If anybody needed something, it's like, oh, well, it's a good thing I have some foundation and a hairdryer. And you're like, what? Why is this a thing? Is it because she's a girl? Because it's a little offensive.
Yeah, same thing happened in Pup Named Scooby-Doo.
Oh, that's right. That's right. She was obsessed with her looks and stuff.
And also she had Jeeves because she was the rich one.
Right.
The second most rich one. Scooby was the most rich in Pup Named Scooby-Doo.
I don't remember that. Did Scooby have a fortune?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He had a giant mansion. Unbelievable. It's so funny when you go back and look at it and you're like, oh, I didn't really register this as a kid, but like the power dynamics of this relationship, of this whole gang, and Scooby, who has an enormous multi-layered mansion below the ground. This is insane.
Okay, so first question covered.
Yeah.
Are there any other answerable questions, or is that the only one?
Favorite character, which franchise did you initially gravitate towards versus which franchise do you now gravitate towards?
Where are you?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't there. Well, okay, I wasn't there in the beginning because I was born in 73.
Yeah.
Not
Okay.
that far off. So I think the
Yeah.
first episodes I saw were probably either new Scooby-Doo movies or Scooby-Doo Shaggy, but anytime I would think back to Scooby-Doo, it would always be those Where Are You episodes. So I would say that's kind of my first point of reference.
Oh,
Now-
interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying that's interesting. Now,
I would probably go to Mystery Incorporated. Well, it's a kind of a three-way tie between Be Cool, Mystery Incorporated, and Where Are You? Those are my go-tos now.
yeah.
Kind of just depends on my mood.
What's the top villain that comes to mind when you think of a Scooby-Doo villain?
It's hard to compete with Space Kook.
Oh, fascinating, because I go to Charlie the Automaton.
Oh, I love Charlie, but see, I don't consider him a villain.
Okay, well, villain loosely based. I get it. Yeah, he doesn't have a lot of control.
I've got a Charlie figure just to my left here.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Where did you get that?
I don't even remember. It was years ago. He comes with this huge, like, cartoon magnet that you can, like, put to his back.
Oh, man. That's awesome. I always think maybe it's because he's also in the intro.
Yeah, that's a
You know what I'm
great.
saying?
Yeah.
Like Scooby runs into him, right? And bounces off
Yeah.
in Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?
And then you get that nice, like, upshot. And he's, like, looking down, and it's obviously not, like, it's a static drawn scene that they're just pulling the camera back from. So it has that really lush, because Scooby-Doo has generally had really wonderful background artists. Like,
The original is so good. Yeah, it's mostly those that Charlie the Automaton and I think Harry the Hypnotist are the two that I always think about.
I don't know. I mean, the Creeper's kind of a go-to. That's such a weird-ass episode, too.
Because you're in love with an ostrich. That it is hard to divorce that episode from that song once you see it as an adult.
That's the recipe for my love, right?
I'm in love with an ostrich. The neighbors don't care, but I feel like let's figure it out. Let's figure it out right now. So narrowing in, we're never gonna find an answer, I think, for everyone to what Scooby-Doo is.
No, I think
But can we find an answer for you after this conversation?
you meaning me or you meaning the listeners?
Yeah, I mean, the people who are listening to this can formulate that on themselves. There's only one person who can talk right now, if I say you. That would be really funny, though, if I waited and we got emails in, and then somehow, like, somebody emailed us and they were listening to this and we addressed them. That would be the future.
That would be awesome if this was Dora the Explorer, but... But anyways, yes. For me, yeah, I think it goes back to what I said about the original Where Are You? It's like as long as you're not embarrassed by it, and you kind of pay homage to it, and you respect kind of what it is, I think you can make a good Scooby-Doo show.
Yeah. It's such a good question that I'm going to answer it myself. I feel like, from my perspective, I don't care if the gags are ridiculous. So, for example, Be Cool pulls out a lot of Deus Ex Machina for the Mystery Machine, for example, right? And I feel like I'm not the biggest fan of that, but I also don't mind it that much because at the end of the day, it's about the characters solving a problem. And anytime Scooby-Doo works for me throughout any of the franchises, it's fundamentally about the characters solving a problem, whether it's Scooby and Shaggy or the full gang. And when I hear somebody like Dax Shepard talking about the Scoob movie and talking about that stoner character, I feel like that's not an honest take of some earnest characters trying to solve a problem. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe that's the trick. Maybe it's that Scooby-Doo presents us with a world where problems are solvable.
Yeah, but it's a world where they can walk in and they can solve something, and that feels like Star Wars to me, where there's a right and a wrong. You know what I'm saying?
You're saying that it's very morally sound.
It's not morally sound, but in that universe, it is. It has a logical progression that's satisfying.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'm down with that.
Okay. And on top of that, it's funny because the sandwich makes their neck big.
I guess we've talked enough. We'll wrap it up, and
for now,
for this epic paradigm-changing crossover episode.
Like, the Scooby-Doo podcast world has irreparably been changed. I mean, it will never be the same.
I think that is a true statement. So anyways, Nick, you have your show. What's with you, Scooby-Doo? Is there anything you want to plug about it, or?
Yeah, you can find What's With You Scooby-Doo on Twitter, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher. Twitter is WWY Scooby-Doo. You can find it on Facebook, facebook.com/What's With You Scooby-Doo. I write stupid Scooby-Doo based songs, and you can find those on wwysd.bandcamp.com.
Really enjoyed those songs, by the way. When you started adding those, that was great.
Thank you very much.
Although that Monster in Mexico one was, it was I don't know. There was something about it that was like, it started and I'm like, I'm not buying this. I'm not enjoying this. And then you brought up the Mexican Bigfoot thing, and then I was in.
So I hadn't watched the episode until a couple days before I was supposed to release it. And I hadn't started working on the episode at all until Saturday before I was going to release it on Sunday. And I wake up in the morning and my girlfriend's like, "Hey, when do you need to start working?" And I was like, noon. And 8:00, I finished the episode, song and all. So it was a little bit rushed. So that's the story behind that one. But yeah, you can find if you Google "What's With You?" Scooby-Doo ! You can find me.
And that's it. Okay, thanks so much, Nick.
Dude,
this
has been insane. I have enjoyed this so much.
We should do it again sometime.
Agreed. Dude, thank you so much for chatting with me about Scooby-Doo, and I apologize so much for the editing that you were about to do.
Oh no, it'll be fun. It'll be good. Well, it's been great sitting here chatting with you, Nick, about our mutually shared favorite topic.
Yeah, and obviously, I'll talk to you soon. Peace out. Scooby-Dooby-Doo!
And there you have it. That was part 2 of my 2-part conversation with Nick Robes from the What's With You Scooby-Doo podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly, as I've reiterated dozens of times in the intros and outros, had a lot of fun talking with Nick. I hope you get the chance to do it again. And I asked Nick if there was anything he wanted me to pimp for him. He wanted me to point out that he's going to be at PortCon, Maine, doing a live podcast on June 23rd at 4 p.m. So if you're in the area, that's something that you could check out. And most assuredly, that will end up as an episode of the podcast, so you'll get to hear it regardless if you listen to Nick's show, which you should because it's incredibly entertaining and Scooby-Doo related, and support your Scooby-Doo podcasts. That's just something you should do. Nick outlined at the end of our conversation where you can find him and his podcast on the interwebs. A podcast named Scooby-Doo, of course, you can always find on Facebook or on Twitter at Scooby-Doo-cast. Always curious to hear what you have to say, any comments or commentary on the show. I read everything and love to get any feedback on the show. Also on Instagram, and you can get the show on Stitcher, and it's now available on iHeartRadio. So if you know anybody who gets their podcasts from those providers, let them know. Tell them you love the show. Tell them they should listen to it. And if you get the show off of iTunes, like probably most, if at the very least many of you do, while you're there, rate the show, review the show. Every little bit helps. That kind of stuff helps get some attention for the podcast, raises it in the podcast standings, in the iTunes listings, and potentially gets more people to see or hear the show, which is always a good thing. Spreading the Scooby-Doo domination of the podcastosphere, as I think I've phrased it once before, should be imperative. Anyways, that's it for me this time. As I said before, next episode will be with Scooby-Doo story editor and all-around entertaining person, John Colton Berry. And I'm still debating whether that's going to come out before the end of May or if that's going to be a June episode. Because I was going to do this one a little bit earlier, and then scheduling, it's always scheduling, prevented me from getting it out kind of last week, so we'll see. Maybe if there's like a vast outcry forcing me to do it, I'll do it. Otherwise, don't expect it before June, but maybe I'll surprise you. So thanks again for listening. Thanks as always for the support. Take care, and we'll see you next time on a podcast named Scooby-Doo.
We noticed when the ghost appeared, she flew around instilling fear. Exactly how she did was still unclear until we saw the broken flight rig of the balladeer, whose name is Kyle! The hovering balladeer! Kyle! Everybody cheer! This is how we solve the mystery. This is how we solve the mystery. So in summation, this narration's my donation to the art of mystery solving dictation. And here's what the bad guys say when they play where the law forbids.
Would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids.
This is how we solve the mystery. Bye.